Welcome back to Dueker Sports. So today I thought we would do something a little bit different. We've been talking about the NFL playoffs a ton, obviously, but we've already broken down the two games that are going to be happening tomorrow. So today I thought we would cover the NFL awards finalists because they came out with that list. I think it was either yesterday or I guess it was Thursday. Thursday morning they came out with that list. So we're going to talk about MVP. We're going to talk about Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year candidates. We're just going to go through, break down each award, the finalists that they gave, and then we're going to go ahead. We're going to rank them. And then with each award, if we decided that maybe someone was left off the list, we're going to tell you who we thought it was. So this is going to be a pretty fun episode. Not usually recording on Saturday, but today's a good day. So let's get started. So the first award, obviously, we're going to talk about MVP. That's the biggest one. So looking at MVP, the five candidates they gave were Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Jefferson. So, like right off the bat, I don't think that anyone was left off this list. I think those are the five candidates. They're the top five choices, in my opinion. So right there, that's how I have them ranked on the bottom of the screen. I think they 100% like. I would be shocked if anyone other than Patrick Mahomes walks away with this award. He is way ahead, in my opinion, of everyone else. He was first in the league in passing touchdowns, first in the league in total touchdowns, second in the league in quarterback rating. He led the Chiefs to the number one seed in the AFC. The guy, like, he definitely, to me, was the best player on the field in all of football this year. I think Josh Allen kind of made it closer towards the end, mostly just because of his ability as a runner. But I don't think Joe Burrow, I don't think he's even close. I love Jalen Hurts. I think he had a fantastic season. I think maybe if he had played the whole season, this would have been a close race because I think that he was the leader for quite some time as MVP candidate. But the two missed games, I think, really put him behind the eight ball here. And then I get why Justin Jefferson's on the list. He had a fantastic year. He was the number one receiver almost across the board. The only thing he didn't lead the league in was yards per catch. Had a phenomenal season. But if Cooper Kupp didn't win MVP last year, and I still kind of think he deserved it, because I think he maybe had the best receiving season in NFL history. If that doesn't deserve MVP, then what Justin Jefferson did surely does not. We'll talk about him later on in a different award, but that's how I have them ranked. My top five right there. I think they got the candidates exactly right. I don't think anyone was left off the list, and I expect Patrick Mahomes to run away with the MVP award.
Yeah, here's my list. I actually have it a little bit different, but I'm in the same boat as you. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to run away with this award. It's kind of hard when he leads yards by, nothing short of a mile. And I think just his overall, he had like so many touchdowns. I think the next closest in touchdowns was, let me check here. I think it was Josh Allen, 35. So he basically threw, 6 more touchdowns than the next closest player. And I think, just the body of work for this season, you lose Tyreek Hill, you come out and you win MVP when everyone expects you to flounder. You deserve MVP in my book. I have Jalen Hurts just because, he got the Philadelphia Eagles to the number one seed before he got hurt. The dude was running the football well. He was passing the football well. He had a great touchdown interception ratio. I think he had 22 passing touchdowns. I just think he was maybe the driving force behind that Philadelphia Eagles offense. And without him, you saw them kind of sputter. Partly, I think I've said this before. I thought the Philadelphia Eagles were bored. They when Jalen went down, they're like, all right, let's just get healthy, and then we'll come back to full strength in the playoffs. But I still think Jalen deserves second place in the MVP rankings. Justin Jefferson, I have at third place, just because I'm with you. I thought Cooper Kupp had probably the greatest season for a wide receiver in NFL history. And he won the Triple Crown last year and was so close to breaking Calvin Johnson's record. I feel like Justin Jefferson was on that pace too. He ended up not actually having quite the season like Cooper Kupp, but without him, if we're talking, just straight up value, when he doesn't produce, the Vikings lose. When he produces, it's very hard to beat the Vikings. And I think that speaks to his value, his talent, He's just a phenomenal wide receiver. And then I have Josh Allen, Joe Burrow coming up with 4 and 5. They both had great seasons too. Josh Allen, I think, gets dinged in my book because of the turnovers. Patrick Mahomes got dinged last year for turnovers, and I thought like 4 interceptions that Patrick Mahomes got listed as interceptions weren't actually his fault because they bounced out of his receiver's hands. I've seen that happen with Josh Allen too, but last year no one cared, so this year I don't care. Josh Allen gets dinged for turnovers. And then Joe Burrow, you lost the first 2 games of the year, but then you went on an incredible run. And I think, I think I have you at 5th because you lost to Cooper Rush and you lost to Mitch Trubisky. So you can't do that and win MVP in my book. If you're going to lose, you have to lose to actual great players at their positions. And I feel like Joe Burrow did not do that. And I'm hearing a lot about quarterback wins this week. So I'm going to ding Joe Burrow here for his losses.
Interesting points that you're making here. I do think that part of the 2 losses you just mentioned, I'm pretty sure both of them were towards the beginning of the season whenever the offensive line was obviously not gelling. But very interesting points. I actually do think Jalen Hurts will finish second in the actual voting. I think that Josh Allen deserves it just because one of the things you just talked about was like the value added to a team and the team going as a certain player goes with Justin Jefferson. That's definitely the case for the Buffalo Bills. He pretty much is that entire team. He's basically their leading rusher and he's their star quarterback. So I definitely, if I was a voter, Patrick Mahomes would get my vote. If I had to pick a second place vote getter, I'd choose Josh Allen. I respect the Jalen Hurts love, and Justin Jefferson had a fantastic season though. Joe Burrow, yeah, I do think that he was the worst of the 4 quarterbacks listed here though. Not that he did not have a good season, but I think these other guys are just too far ahead. So now we're going to move on to our next award, which this is going to be Defensive Player of the Year. So Defensive Player of the Year, here's how I have them ranked. I think it's Nick Bosa, Chris Jones, and Micah Parsons. Now, I do think someone was left off this list. Max Crosby is a huge snub off this list to me. I know Christian and I disagree about this part because we just talked about it right before the show started. But I think Max Crosby was the number 2 defensive player this year. I think Chris Jones deserves 3rd, but I'd put Max Crosby number 2. And it's because Max Crosby, let me see if I can find it. I wrote it down somewhere. There it is. Max Crosby, yeah, he was 2nd in the league in quarterback hits, which we're going to talk about that in just a second. He was 1st in the league in tackles for loss. He had more tackles than all 3 of these guys. He was also, in comparison to these 3 players, he was tied in 1st with pass deflections. He was tied in 1st with forced fumbles. I just think that he had an all-around better year. The only thing he did not have more of than the number 2 and 3 guys on this list are sacks. He had 12.5 sacks. I think that's what cost him. I think that sacks are one of the what they would call as a pretty statistic. You look for things like sacks and interceptions, and then people think that shows you who the best player is. That is not always the case, and I don't think it was this year. I do think Chris Jones is very deserving to be on this list, but I think he's the 3rd best defensive player this year. I think Crosby was number 2. I don't think Micah Parsons. I mean, I'm not saying that he, I guess, doesn't deserve to be on the list, but I think that Crosby deserves it more, is what I'm trying to say. I think Parsons, especially to begin the year, was on an absolute tear, but he ended the season very on a slow note. He wasn't able to be as effective towards the end of the season. So I'm a little bit surprised that he still made this list. But out of the guys listed, I think it's Nick Bosa is going to run away with this, just like Patrick Mahomes with the MVP. Nick Bosa, not only did he lead the league in sacks with 18.5, which is 3 more than Chris Jones, who was 2nd on, I don't know, not in the entire league because that's Hassan Reddick, which I almost considered saying he was left off this list, but I do kind of agree. I'd probably put him 5th in terms of defensive players this year. Even though I think he had a fantastic season. But Nick Bosa actually led the league in quarterback hits. Not only did he lead the league, he finished 3rd all time in quarterback hits. And only one player has ever had more quarterback hits in a season than him. And I just said that he was 3rd. So how does that make sense? It's because J.J. Watt did it twice. And J.J. Watt's one of the best pass rushers of all time. And actually, Nick Bosa becomes only the 2nd player in NFL history behind Watt to have 45 plus quarterback hits and over 15 sacks in one season. So I think Nick Bosa, not only did he have the best year this year of any defender, he just had, in my opinion, a historically great season as a pass rusher. And I think he will run away with this award. I think that Chris Jones had an absolutely phenomenal season and definitely deserving to be on this list of candidates. And then Micah Parsons, I think when he's at the top of his game, he's one of the best players in the league. Just on, it doesn't matter if you're talking offensive or defensive players. He just is one of the best all-around players in the league. He might be the most, in my opinion, I think he's the most feared pass rusher, whether he deserves it or not. And I think it's because of his athletic ability, which is just absolutely absurd. But I think this is a pretty solid list. Again, I would put Crosby on the list. I don't think he gets nearly enough respect for what he does on the field. He was the Raiders' defense this season. I think them having a bad season, that's kind of probably why he fell off the list. Because you look at these three teams right here, they end up having three of the best records in the league, and these guys were the defensive leaders. So I understand the list. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I also don't think it's awful.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard. You can't really go wrong with the top two players here, in my opinion. But you can call me a homer if you want, but I have Chris Jones. I actually agree with Pro Football Focus. I have Chris Jones as the Defensive Player of the Year this year. He had 15 and a half sacks from the defensive tackle position. That's really rare. He was the highest graded defensive lineman out of all the finalists this year for this award. He also was number one in quarterback hurry. So here's the thing: quarterback hits, great statistic. After the ball leaves the quarterback, if they get a hit or a touch on the quarterback, I'm sure it's counted. Does that actually affect the quarterback whenever they're making a throw or a read? I don't think it's as effective as quarterback hurries, which to me is a sign that your blitz, your pass rush was disruptive. And Chris Jones was tied for first with 16. This is how amazing Von Miller is. He played only 11 games, also had 16.
Wow.
But yeah, quarterback hurries. Chris Jones destroyed Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa was 23rd in the NFL with only 9. So I think Chris Jones has the edge there. Of course, Pro Football Focus decided Chris Jones was the Defensive Player of the Year this year. I think another reason why I have Chris Jones as the Defensive Player of the Year is because from the defensive tackle position, an interior lineman is the highest pass rush win rate out of all the qualifying defensive tackle positions with 21%. The next closest, 17%. Second place, Nick Bosa, 18 and a half sacks. Like you said, a historical season. I'm taking nothing from Nick Bosa, and I'm not going to be mad or upset if Nick Bosa wins. He had an outstanding year. But I think as far as from the defensive tackle position, the type of year that Chris Jones had this year, I think he's deserving of first. And I'm 100% with you. The problem here is third place. Micah Parsons, I think, gets the nod because from an edge defender perspective, he had a pass rush win rate of 30%. Nick Bosa is on that list at 9 with only 22%. So Micah Parsons, he's 11 from heaven for a reason. The dude's a stud. But I think Max Crosby does deserve an honorable mention here because Max Crosby had 89 tackles from the edge position, dude. The dude, like Dylan said, he was the Raiders defense this year. There's no question about that. He was phenomenal, deserved to be in the mentions here. I don't think he deserved to be number 2, but he definitely deserved to be either 3 or 4. I don't think you could have gone wrong with that. But this is my Defensive Player of the Year list.
So one thing I wanted to say, you talked about Nick Bosa being, I forget what, 23rd in quarterback hurries. And I think that's because he was too busy hitting them and sacking them. He wasn't just hurrying them. When you lead the league in sacks and quarterback hits, I don't know if it matters that you were 23rd in hurries because he got the job done. But no, I think you just brought up some fantastic points. That was a great debate. I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, I think Chris Jones and Nick Bosa. I think you're right. You can't go wrong with either one of those if either of them win. I will honestly say that I would be surprised if Nick Bosa does not win, but I wouldn't be upset because I looked it up while you were talking. I wanted to see who is the all-time sack leader from the defensive tackle position, and it is Aaron Donald, and he had 18 and a half. So Chris Jones just 3 behind. But obviously a fantastic season. It is very difficult to get 15 and a half sacks from the defensive tackle position. And I think he kind of sets the tone for the entire Kansas City Chiefs defense. So definitely deserving to be on this list after having the best season of his career. Moving on to the next list. This is going to be Offensive Player of the Year. And this is a very interesting list because 3 of these guys are holdovers from the MVP list.
Right.
So now here's the list I have. This is the order I have them in: Jalen Hurts, Justin Jefferson, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. Now, why do I have Patrick Mahomes number 3 if I think he's the best player in the league? That's because they do sometimes give out the MVP award and Offensive Player of the Year award to the same player. I actually don't like it when they do that. I think that's kind of dumb. I think obviously if you're the MVP and you're an offensive player, then you're the best offensive player in the year. You don't need another award telling you that. So he might win both, honestly, because of how far ahead he is of everybody else. I would not be surprised. But on my list, this is how I'm putting him. I've got Jalen Hurts number 1, and it was close for me with him and Justin Jefferson. I really could have gone either way here. The reason why I've got Hurts there is because, number 1, the way that the Eagles played without him, I think really changed. I love Jalen Hurts, but I have been kind of on the fence. I don't know if he's as good as what the statistics say or as good as the Eagles have looked. I don't think he's a system quarterback by any means, but I think that the team around him is so strong. The offensive line is absolutely incredible. They have the best receiving core in the league. They really helped him get set up for success. But his ability to run the ball, he had 13 rushing touchdowns, which is absurd. He had 760 rushing yards, and he missed 2 games. And then in the final game of the season, he barely ran the ball at all because they were trying to keep him healthy. So had he stayed healthy, I mean, he could have been pushing, closer to 900 rushing yards. But he had 22 passing touchdowns compared to only 6 interceptions, which I think might have been the number 1 touchdown interception ratio in the league this year. Don't know. I have to look that up for sure. But he was one of the top quarterbacks in terms of quarterback rating. And I think you look at teams that had success, and you just look at who won the number 1 seeds. It was the Chiefs and it was the Eagles. Now, the Bills could have potentially won the number 1 seed in the AFC, but we just saw what the Bengals did to them in the playoffs, and I wonder if they wouldn't have done the same thing in the regular season. They were already winning that game 7-3 before the very unfortunate Hamlin incident. But I think Jalen Hurts will win the Offensive Player of the Year award just because he did too many great things. I think his improvement from last year to this year is night and day. I think that he's the leader of what I think is the best team in the National Football League. And then he's a dual threat. He right now this year might be the best overall dual threat quarterback in the league in terms of ability to both pass and run the ball. So I think that he wins this award. Justin Jefferson, very close second. Like I said, I don't know if he got the triple crown. Did he lead the league in touchdowns? Receiving touchdowns?
Let's check.
Okay, so I don't know if he won it. He definitely, yeah. So he didn't get the triple crown, but I think that he was obviously the best receiver. Who did lead the league in touchdowns?
Devontae Adams.
That makes sense. How many did he have?
14. And then Justin Jefferson had 8.
Yeah. So I think, Justin Jefferson, great season, led the league in receiving yards. He had one of the best receiving yard total seasons in the NFL history. But I just don't think, I don't think he had one of the most, I think if it wasn't for the extra game, he would have been even further behind. But I don't think that he deserves MVP consideration, really. He's on the list, but I think that he'll finish dead last. But I do think he was close, but I just think Jalen Hurts had a season. We've already talked about Patrick Mahomes, and then with Tyreek Hill, I've got him dead last because he basically had a very similar season to Justin Jefferson, just slightly worse in every single category except for yards per reception. That's not taking away because I think he's on a team with Jalen Waddle, where Jalen Waddle also had a fantastic season. So, Justin Jefferson gets almost seemingly every target in Minnesota, it feels like some days. So Tyreek Hill had to split with another fantastic receiver. Otherwise, he probably would have had an even better season than Justin Jefferson did. But I think he deserved to be on the list, but I definitely think that he deserves to be fourth on this list.
Yeah, my list is very close to yours. I have Jalen Hurts winning Offensive Player of the Year. I have Patrick on fourth place because I'm sort of like you. I kind of if one person wins the MVP, I don't mind if they win Offensive Player of the Year, but I want to give other players their shine too. Uh, this isn't a Dan Orlovsky, Patrick Mahomes is the best player, but Joe Burrow is the best quarterback. That doesn't make logical sense. If you're the MVP, you're probably going to be Offensive Player of the Year as well, depending on which position you play. But I'm throwing that out the window because we've already have Patrick Mahomes as the MVP. I want to give shine to these other players. Jalen Hurts, definitely my number one Offensive Player of the Year, ceteris paribus. Just because Jalen's season before it went down was phenomenal, and he had the Eagles as the number one team in football as far as record is concerned. And I know that that's a big for quarterbacks, especially. That's a huge stat. If you can get your team to the number one seed, very likely that's going to aid in your cause for any regular season award, let alone MVP. So Jalen Hurts here, his offensive production, how valuable he is to the team. I have him winning first place here for Offensive Player of the Year. Justin Jefferson, just everything that you said. Justin Jefferson is the Minnesota Vikings on offense for the most part. Dalvin Cook's getting older, still producing, but getting older. And now they have Justin Jefferson at the wide receiver spot, threatening the second level and third levels of the defense. And I think he's done that at such a phenomenal rate this year that he deserves second place here. My third place here is Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek, he's splitting touches, he's splitting targets, he's splitting catches with Jalen Waddle. And also, if you think about the number of quarterback changes that happened this year because the Dolphins don't know how to diagnose people credibly and say, hey, you're not playing Tua, you get him hurt more. He's still in concussion protocol, by the way. That's insane. He dealt with a lot of quarterback controversies, really. And so it didn't matter who was throwing him the ball. He was still producing because he's Tyreek Hill. He's a Hall of Fame level talent. I think by the end of his career, he will be mentioned as a Hall of Famer, better than Bullet Bob Hayes, because that's who he reminds me of the most, really. But I have him at third because it didn't matter who you put at the quarterback spot. He still produced. He runs just as fast and just as well as his mouth. And you can't hope for that from any other. You can't ask for more from a player. You can ask for less mouth, but you can't ask for more production. He basically carried the Dolphins sometimes when they needed it most. So I have him at number 3. Patrick Mahomes, obviously number 4, could easily be number 1, winning the MVP by a mile. Statistics galore, but it doesn't need any more saying.
Yeah. The more that I'm thinking about it, I feel like this is the type of year that they're going to give it Mahomes both awards. I think just because of how far ahead he was, like I said, but I hope that not to see that because I like to see other players. We know he had a fantastic year. Now let's give someone else the Offensive Player of the Year award. So moving on now, we're going to discuss some Rookie of the Year candidates. So Offensive Rookie of the Year to begin with. This is a very fascinating list to me, mostly because Brock Purdy's on it. But I've been saying this for weeks on end. Kenneth Walker III is the Offensive Rookie of the Year. If he's not, and I'm afraid he won't be, then I think it's just outrageous. I think the guy has had by far the biggest impact on his new team. I mean, obviously Brock Purdy is undefeated as a starter, which is fantastic, but the Niners were fantastic with Jimmy Garoppolo as well. Kenneth Walker III, I think you take him off that team, I think it impacts him in a major way. I think it would cause them to be one-dimensional, and I think it would really, limit what they're able to do on offense all around. So Kenneth Walker, he had 1,050 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. He also had 27 catches, only for 165 yards. But he finished 12th in the league in rushing yards and 10th in touchdowns. So, and that's counting quarterbacks is the only reason why he's not higher up on both of those lists. Justin Fields obviously ahead of him in terms of rushing yards, and Jalen Hurts ahead of him in terms of touchdowns. However, so I mean, you take that in consideration. That means that this guy pretty much he was a top 10 running back his rookie season, and he also missed a game. So, and actually, I think he may have missed more than one game, but This guy, I think, had an absolutely phenomenal season. I think he is very deserving of the award. I do think the Brock Purdy choice in this on this list is very fascinating because this is a guy who only started 5 games in the regular season. Now, in those 5 games, he did some interesting things. First of all, he went 5-0. That's pretty fantastic. He was the last pick of the draft. Mr. Irrelevant has been anything but. No quarterback ever selected with the last pick of the draft has even thrown for 1 touchdown. He was able to throw for 13 touchdowns just in the final 5 weeks, which is outrageous. He led the league in passing touchdowns in the last 5 weeks of the season. He also had 1,374 passing yards. His quarterback rating was 107.3. His completion percentage was identical to Patrick Mahomes. Now, he doesn't technically qualify as a league leader in quarterback rating or in completion percentage because in order to do so, you need to average 14 attempts for the course of 17 games. Obviously, only playing 5 games, he ended up falling 68 attempts short of that total, which is actually he was averaging 34 pass attempts a game. So he basically needed 2 more games and he would have qualified. And I think he would have, if he had continued at the pace he was at, he would have led the league in quarterback rating, and he would have been I think Patrick Mahomes finished 6th in completion percentage or something like that, and Purdy's was identical. And you're talking about that with the guy who I think is going to run away with MVP. So I think I understand why he's on the list, having only played 5 games, given what I just said. I don't think that's enough to overtake Kenneth Walker III. And then when you look at Garrett Wilson, I think he had a phenomenal season. The Jets were an absolute mess on offense this year. You had receivers getting upset and not playing with the team. You had a constant revolving door at the quarterback position. It's just an absolute mess. Now they're hiring Nathaniel Hackett to be their offensive coordinator. I don't know if that's a good idea because their quarterbacks were having enough difficulty as it is, let alone bringing in one of the most complicated offensive schemes in the National Football League. I don't think that's going to help Zach Wilson. And I don't think any other quarterback that's on that roster right now is even a viable option for franchise quarterback. Quite frankly, neither is Zach Wilson. But Garrett Wilson was able to perform kind of like what you said. No matter who was playing quarterback, Garrett Wilson went out. He did his job. And, some weeks he didn't show up on the stat sheet as good as some weeks, is what I'm trying to say. But he still performed week in, week out. He did his job. He finished with 1,103 yards. He had 83 catches. The only knock on him was the 4 touchdowns, in my opinion. He couldn't find the end zone, but neither could the Jets offense as a whole. So I can't really blame that on him. But I think this is a pretty decent list. I do think you have the best receiver, quarterback, and running back that were rookies this year on this list. So pretty solid list.
Yeah, mine's different. I just moved Brock Purdy down to 3rd. Here's my thing. Kenneth Walker, I was really big on even preseason. I actually drafted him in 3 of my fantasy leagues. Some people looked at me side-eyed, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, as soon as this guy gets his opportunity, he's not letting it go. He is by far, to me, the best running back on the Seahawks roster. And I knew, Rashad Penny not gonna keep the starting job. DJ Dallas, not even a starter to begin with. He's already better than DJ. I'm like, the moment he gets his opportunity, he's not letting it go, and that's exactly what happened. Kenneth Walker destroyed this year, and if it weren't, I think he was the second best rookie running back this year because Breece Hall, I think, was leading the way until he got hurt. But Kenneth Walker was right up there and had a phenomenal season. He had 1,200 total yards, 1,215 with 9 touchdowns. That's a great rookie year, especially when you didn't start the entirety of the season because you were splitting carries with Rashad Penny, who ended up going on IR along with Travis Homer. So, you step up and they need you. You basically are in a run-first offense. Pete Carroll gives you the football. He knows what kind of talent you have, and I think he made the most of it. So I have him as an offensive rookie of the year. I have Garrett Wilson as number 2. He had 1,103 receiving yards this year, just like you said. Didn't matter which quarterback was behind there, and there were many, and they were confusing. And they weren't actually necessarily playing well, but it didn't matter. Garrett Wilson still produced and had an 1,100-yard season with a rotation of quarterbacks that were uncertain. I think that warrants second place here in Offensive Rookie of the Year, and certainly cements him as one of the best wide receivers in football, given the talent he had at quarterback and the rotation he had. Brock Purdy at number 3. I have a hard time with this because he only played 5 games. He was absolutely phenomenal for all the reasons you said, but it's like it's 5 games. There are other rookies I think that could have been up here who played more games and had just as good of production relative to how many snaps they played the Brock Purdy. But I totally understand because Brock Purdy's the next Kurt Warner, as people are saying, the Mr. Irrelevant who shouldn't have been playing, gets his top 2 quarterbacks get hurt. He steps in, leads them 5-0 record, gets them to the playoffs and wins some playoff games. Phenomenal playing by him too. He didn't mess things up. He actually played really, really well. I think from what I know, he was graded as a first round talent like 2 years ago. And then his senior, when he went back to Iowa State, didn't have as good of production, so he kind of faltered. I didn't know he faltered that bad because I still have scarred memories of muscle clinches whenever he played Oklahoma, and they almost beat us. But I understand why he's third place, so I have him at 3 here.
Yeah, and I actually love the Kurt Warner comparison. Brock Purdy, obviously, I think a lot of people are like talking about him being like a Tom Brady-esque. And I saw a thing, I think it was on Bleacher Report. I don't know where I saw it, but probably where they talked about what one scout had said about him. I don't know if you saw this. He put 2 words in this final evaluation: not interested. And I'd be curious to see what scout that was and if he's interested now, because Brock Purdy's playing phenomenally well.
Or if
But
he's
I think
interested in continued employment.
yeah, that's pretty. Some of these scouts get a little, I don't know, a little testy with their evaluations. But Brock Purdy, I'm interested in him, and I think that everyone should be because he's playing fantastic football right now. I'm actually very nervous about the game tomorrow. I think the Eagles should win, but by no means will it be an easy game. Brock Purdy's played phenomenally well, especially taking into consideration that he's only a rookie who was the last pick in the draft, and he got thrown into the starting lineup kind of last second because due to injury. So it's not like he was practicing with the ones. I don't think anyone expected him to play at all this season because he came in like as the 3rd quarterback on that team. But he's played phenomenally well. And I think that not only does Kenneth Walker III deserve the Offensive Rookie of the Year, he also has the best nickname because he's K9. And love that and love Kenneth Walker III. I definitely, yeah, he is an absolute monster. He's one of my favorite players actually coming out of college football last year. So I think I do agree with the list. Actually, I think Brock Purdy does deserve to be on it. And I think I had him number 2 because he's quite, like, I honestly think he was the best quarterback in the league for the last 5 weeks. So absolutely incredible. And I think, they're not supposed to take into consideration the playoffs with these lists, but I'm thinking that they probably did. Yeah, I think they always do. They're not supposed to, but I think if you don't want them to take that into consideration, then release the finalists as soon as the season's over.
Yep.
Because how are you supposed to ignore what Brock Purdy is doing right now in the playoffs? Because he's now led his team to the NFC Championship. Obviously, he has plenty of help on both sides of the ball to do so. But the thing that I'm most impressed with Brock Purdy is his decision making and lack of turnovers. It seems like he's a veteran already in the league. Like when he's under pressure, we saw it with the Dallas Cowboys game. He had a very basic game. He didn't do anything prolific, but what he did do was hold on to the football. He threw it away when he should throw it away, and I think it's absurd that this guy. I don't know how in the world this happens. We saw with Tom Brady. How did he fall to the 6th round? I don't know. He's the best quarterback of all time. Now you've got Brock Purdy just absolutely on a tear. I would love to see him be able to continue this throughout his career. That quarterback rotation is going to be very interesting in the offseason. Jimmy Garoppolo is having one of his best seasons before he went down. You have Trey Lance, who I don't care that he played in the Bears game and sucked. It was like a monsoon on the field that day. So I don't know how you can possibly make any solid evaluation of any quarterback in the league. I don't think anyone would have succeeded that day. So they have a lot of decisions to make on this roster because I don't know how you don't stick with Brock Purdy. But, maybe this season was a fluke, but it's been a magical fluke if it was one. And I think you have to give him the chance going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be one of the biggest offseason talking points this year. So what do you do with the 49ers quarterback position?
I will give a hot take right here. What I think you do is I think you trade Trey Lance because I genuinely believe that he would draw the most capital. I think you might be able to get a second round pick out of Trey Lance because of the unknown factor. You see his athletic ability, you see his arm talent. So I think if you trade him right now, the fact that he only has started one game and it was in an absolute monsoon. Technically, I guess he started two, but he got hurt very early on in week two. Um, his rookie year, he threw 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. So that's fantastic. So I think you can trade him and you can probably get a second round pick. So if I'm them, I keep Garoppolo and Purdy. I trade Trey Lance because Purdy and Garoppolo have both proven capable of winning on a larger scale than Trey Lance. Obviously, he hasn't had the opportunity, but you've got two guys that can get it done. Trade and keep building around these two quarterbacks, and I think you're fine.
Hot take indeed, but I agree with it.
Yeah. Moving on to defensive rookie of the year. This is another fascinating list. So I think they've got it 100% right. I don't think there's any arguments to be made outside of these three guys, in my opinion. You're making a face. I don't know if you agree or disagree. Or maybe that's just your normal face. I don't know. My bad. But I think Sauce Gardner is definitely going to win this award. This is another one of those things where I think a player is going to run away with it. And he didn't have necessarily the best statistics. But once again, I'm telling you, like statistics, I value them as much as anybody. Honestly, that's how I make a lot of my determinations. But every now and then, a player like Sauce Gardner rolls around, and you got to throw him right out the window. Especially cornerback, I think is the number one position where that happens, because then you end up getting in a situation where quarterbacks are avoiding an entire half of the field, like Revis Island. He didn't lead the league in interceptions that many times. I don't even know if he ever did, maybe once. But it's because people literally would not even target him. They were so afraid of him. Sauce Gardner, he doesn't have a Gardner Island quite yet, but he's well on his way. Because this year he had the number one coverage grade in the National Football League. He was ranked as the number one corner by Pro Football Focus. He did end up getting 2 interceptions, and he also had 75 tackles, which is pretty impressive as a corner as well. If you're looking for statistics to prove that he was number one in the league, he has one of those as well in his pass deflections. He led the league with 20 pass deflections. The guy was absolutely phenomenal. He was actually the guy that I wanted the Eagles to take in the first round. I knew he would not fall to us. We did all right with how I think we had the best draft in the league last year, quite honestly. So I think we did all right, but Sauce Gardner might be the best player from the draft. Going on to number 2, Aiden Hutchinson. This dude had a freaking fantastic year. And you look at the Lions defense, which struggled all season, but it wasn't because of Aiden Hutchinson. This dude went on an absolute tear. He had 9.5 sacks this year. And a thing that I think I'm most impressed with is 3 interceptions. He's a defensive end with 3 interceptions. He had never had an interception, he said, in his entire career. Not in high school or in college. He has 3 as a rookie. And 2 of those 3 interceptions were just fantastic plays on his part. He knew he wasn't going to be able to get to the quarterback. And last second, he read the quarterback's eyes, dropped back in coverage. Quarterback obviously not expecting that. They basically threw the ball right to him, but it's his ability to read the quarterback and to understand situations. And one of those were on the goal line. And I don't know, phenomenal. His decision-making and awareness as a rookie, kind of like what we just talked about with Brock Purdy, just absolutely off the charts. I think he had a fantastic season. He's hands down number 2 on this list to me. And that's no disrespect to number 3, which is Tariq Woolen, who led the league in interceptions. He was tied, but he had 6 interceptions as a rookie. He is an athletic, just freak on the field. He is so fast. He proved capable. I think a lot of people question like his discipline as an actual corner, but I think he proved this year that he not only can intercept the ball, but he can also shut people down in coverage. Like the Seahawks, I think had the second best draft behind the Eagles this year. And Tariq Woolen's a big reason why. Look at this. They have 2 guys for Rookie of the Year candidates. Absolutely incredible. They've got a lot of talent to build on. But this list, fantastic list, well done by the NFL. And that's how I have it ranked out. Let's see if Christian agrees.
Yeah, I don't agree. I really agree, actually. It's not just agreement. It's really, really, really affirmative here because Sauce Gardner, like you said, phenomenal season, ranked as not just one of the best, but the best corner in football this year as a rookie. And Jet fans are no stranger to prodigious corners. Let me tell you. So Sauce Gardner, definitely agree with him being number one. Like you said about Aiden Hutchinson, never had an interception in his career. Just decided to go out there, mess around, and get three of them as a rookie, and doing it in like a veteran fashion, understanding I'm not going to be able to get to the quarterback. Let me still try and make a play, and he does. And he caught the ball better than some corners I've seen. So props to him. Definitely feel like he's number two. Feel like he can be an anchor for the Detroit Lions defense for a very, very long time. And then Tariq Woolen. A lot of people ranted and raved about his speed, but I feel like in the midst of his speed and how prolific it is, his ball skills were underrated. And then you see them come out on tape. You see how he gets 6 interceptions. He also had an interception returned for a touchdown, which everyone else that's had 6 interceptions, only one of them actually did that. That was Minka Fitzpatrick. You're up there in the upper echelon of interceptions, tied for first place as a rookie. I remember some other guy that did that. His name was Marcus Peters, and he had 8. And he got defensive rookie of the year attention. So Tariq Woolen, I think, also deserves to get defensive rookie of the year attention, specifically because of his production. He's not as technically sound as Sauce Gardner, but that type of technicality is rare coming out of college. And I think he produced more than enough to cement himself as maybe a top 20 corner, top 15 corner in the league. And I can't wait to see how these 3 guys, their careers progress, because they're certainly interesting ball players.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Obviously, we have the same list. I think that's the first time that's happened today, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
We've got 2 more awards to go. The next one, I don't know. To me, it's the most boring list we have, but let's go to it. It's the comeback player of the year. And I don't know. I don't know why, but I don't like this list at all. I think, first of all, what immediately comes to my mind as comeback player of the year is like a guy who missed a majority of the previous season and then came back and played fantastically. All 3 of these guys actually played last year. Christian McCaffrey played 7 games. Saquon Barkley played almost the whole entire season. He played 13. Geno Smith got a couple spot starts. But I think they didn't even need to put 3 players on this list because only one player matters, and it's Geno Smith. Geno Smith dang near doubled. I think he's been in the league 7 or 8 years. He almost doubled every single statistical category he had. He had 4,282 yards. He had 30 passing touchdowns. He only had 34 in his entire career coming into the season. He only threw 11 interceptions. He had a 100.9 quarterback rating. He also had 366 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. On top of all of that, he led the league in completion percentage. He finished 8th in the league in yards, 5th in the league in quarterback rating, and 4th in the league in passing touchdowns. 100% needs to comeback player of the year. It's literally not even close in my opinion. I think it should just be like comeback player of the year finalist. 1, Geno Smith. And then you go on and you talk about the next award. Christian McCaffrey, I've got him number 2 on this list because he had a better season than Saquon Barkley. However, if you look at their seasons or their careers, I think this year Saquon Barkley had his second best season of his entire career. I am super excited to see him back healthy. He's like one of my favorite running backs of all time, like coming out of the draft. You mentioned a couple weeks ago, and I couldn't agree more. He reminded me of LaDainian Tomlinson, reminded you of LaDainian Tomlinson. I thought we were about to witness history with this guy. Loved watching him at Penn State, one of my favorite running backs I've ever seen play college football. And I did – Jonathan Taylor's up there as well, but Saquon Barkley was just prolific in college, and he is in the National Football League too when he can stay healthy. So I'm glad he finally got the opportunity to show that he does still have it. Last year, the Giants were just dismal on offense. They're terrible, and it killed them. They were one-dimensional. Every team dared the Giants to throw the football. They couldn't do it. This year, Daniel Jones had the best year of his career. Brian Daboll, I think, changed the culture. And because of those 2 things, it opened up the run game for Saquon Barkley again. I would love to see the Giants, and I'm saying this as an Eagles fan, I'd love to see the Giants get a true number 1 wide receiver and see what this team could do then. I think Daniel Jones deserves another chance to start at quarterback because he's another player who he makes great decisions most of the time. The fact that he has really never had a true number 1 wide receiver I think you can't really judge his statistics off of that. Obviously, he made some mistakes against the Eagles last weekend, but he was under constant pressure. He was getting drilled on every other play, it seemed like. So he had really no choice. He had to give them the chance to win. They lost 38-7, but I think it's because, as you mentioned, the Giants maybe played a little bit above their talent, but I don't necessarily believe that. I think that they, quite frankly, they just ran into a buzzsaw that is the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think the same thing would have happened to them had they ran into the Minnesota, or not, I almost said the Minnesota Vikings, the San Francisco 49ers is what I'm trying to say. They ran into one of the top teams in the league, and they're definitely not ready for that level of playoff football yet. But they're close; they're getting there. So, honestly, I think if I had to vote, I might choose Saquon at number 2. But I'm going Christian McCaffrey because Christian McCaffrey had more all-purpose yards, he had more all-purpose touchdowns, and that's because of his receiving ability. And Saquon Barkley is one of the best receiving running backs in the league as well, but Christian McCaffrey is one of the best of all time. And I think he had a phenomenal season this year. I think he's a big reason why the 49ers have been successful. They looked great before he got there. They look unbeatable almost since he's arrived. But I think this list is quite interesting. I don't really necessarily have a player that I think deserved to be on it more than these 3 guys, but to me, this is like 100%. Like, I feel like it should be unanimous that it's Geno Smith.
Yeah, I'm pretty much copied your homework here because I have the same list. But I think there's a good. So while I agree, Geno Smith is the comeback player of the year this year, I do think Christian McCaffrey is a very close second, and here's why. And it's not just because he played 7 games last year; he's only played 10 games uh, over the in the last 2 seasons before this one. So he suffered season-ending injuries in both of those seasons, and then he comes back and looks as good as ever. Um, Geno Smith, just like you said, just destroyed every expectation that everyone had of them, and made the Seahawks basically the force that they were this season, and definitely is deserving of comeback player of the year because no one saw this coming. I didn't see this coming. I only think that 2 people saw this coming: Geno Smith and Pete Carroll. I don't think anyone else saw it coming. Um, but I think Christian McCaffrey he had almost 2,000 yards of all-purpose yards, because that also includes his 34-yard touchdown he had this year when he threw the ball. And he also had 14 total touchdowns. I think that season, just like you said, was more impressive to me than Saquon, even though I know Saquon got hurt too last year. But McCaffrey played less games. And I think McCaffrey outproduced him this year, even in the midst of learning an entirely new offense. In the middle of the season, came out and still produced. So I think Christian McCaffrey, to me, is a very close second to Geno Smith because I think McCaffrey regained his old form immediately. As soon as he came back and he was healthy, he looked the same to me. But Saquon, like you mentioned, 3rd place here. He finished 4th in the league in rushing yards this year. He looked just as good as he did coming out of college. He's still got an amazing burst. He still has giant tree trunks for legs. I mean, those aren't thighs; those are ints from the Lord of the Rings. Middle Earth. They decided they're going to grow on Saquon's legs, and he's just going to have tree trunks for legs. And he still cuts on a dime. The dude is super elusive. Hasn't lost a bit of athleticism despite the injuries. But I agree with you. He's 3rd on this list.
You mean second? You have him second on the list.
Saquon is 3rd on the list.
Oh, you switched it. I still thought you were talking about Christian McCaffrey, but
No.
however, you kind of have closed the gap in my mind a little bit between McCaffrey and Geno Smith. You provided some pretty valuable insight here. Still think it's Geno Smith, but yeah, I definitely, after what you just said, I think it's maybe. I still think it deserves to be unanimous, but I do think everyone should be like, it's Geno Smith, but Christian McCaffrey had a pretty good season. Yeah.
That's just good.
I love the meme that I've seen, and it's so true. But the trade of Russell Westbrook, we're talking about the NBA. Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. Have you seen the one where it's like a Scooby-Doo meme where Russell Wilson takes off the mask and it's actually Geno Smith, and Russell Wilson's still in the Seahawks? And it's because that's how good Geno Smith was. He set the franchise record for passing yards.
Yeah.
after Russell Wilson just played there for dang near a decade, and he's like Russell Wilson's a Hall of Fame quarterback when his career is done. I don't care. Dude won a Super Bowl. The dude's played fantastic. He has also shattered expectations throughout his career. Geno Smith is honestly just a good guy. I love to see him succeeding. I loved his quote of "They wrote me off, but I didn't write back," and I love it. He believed in himself. He's had one heck of a road to get here. So very few players are as deserving of this award as he has been, because he's put up with like 7 years of bouncing around the league. A lot of people counted him out because he played for the New York Jets. That's the reason why he sucked, because no quarterback has been successful with the New York Jets for quite some time. The last one, Mark Sanchez, was successful in terms of team record. That's because that defense was lethal when he was there. The last quarterback I think that actually had a great statistical season for the New York Jets was Brett Favre in the 1 year that he played there. So they have a rotating door at quarterback, and I think they keep writing off these quarterbacks as they go through the New York Jets system. And I think it's obviously an organizational issue, because they've tried drafting everyone you could think of to fix that position. So Geno Smith was written off because of he played for the New York Jets. I love that he's gotten a chance. He's actually had a few good games that kind of you could see that this maybe a season like this could happen for him. I just like that he finally got the opportunity, and I'm excited. Whenever they were talking about Drew Lock potentially being the starter over Geno Smith, I was like, there's no way. Because to me, I don't think Drew Lock's a very good quarterback. I'm from Missouri. I quite frankly didn't think he was good when he played for Mizzou. I think he was overrated, and I still think he's overrated. I love to see Geno Smith, though, getting finally the recognition he deserves. I thought he was a great player in college, and he was able to prove that he still has some of that ability this year. And this is going to take us to our final award. This is the one I'm actually the most excited about, because I think it's the tightest race and the best list of candidates we've seen so far. And that's Coach of the Year. So, first of all, my goodness, this is how I have it ranked. Honestly, any of those top 4 guys, in my opinion, are equally deserving of this award. Now, I don't think Sean McDermott, I talk about the best list that we've had. Sean McDermott had a fantastic season as a head coach. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills, a lot of people thought they were going to win the Super Bowl coming in. And that's kind of why I don't think he deserves to be on the list, because I almost think that they underperformed compared to what people expected from them, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because the expectations were Super Bowl. Almost everyone was picking the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl this year. So I think, they won 13 games. They won 13 games, I believe, last year, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check real quick. No, they actually only won 11 games last year. So they did win 2 more games this year than last season. But, we're not supposed to take into consideration the playoffs. And earlier we talked about it helping someone. Sean McDermott's hoping they don't take into consideration, because it would definitely hurt his chances. I do think there are 2 guys left off this list. And it's just because I think there are so many great coaches this season. Number 1, and you mentioned that you thought there was someone left off too. So I'll see if I can get it. But this is the order that I think. Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell is my first guy. I think that he deserved to be on the list. You're going to say Andy Reid now. I just realized. Dan Campbell, to me, deserves to be the 5th guy on this list. He completely has that organization turned around. He's only been there for 2 years. He's also, you talk about someone who's able to change the culture, which is why I've got Brian Daboll number 1. Dan Campbell has turned around one of the worst franchises in NFL history. This team has been absolutely terrible for so many years. I think he deserved to be on this list more than Sean McDermott. Also, Kevin O'Connell, who was a first-year coach and led the Minnesota Vikings to 13 wins. Had they not played the NFC East, who knows what would have happened? The NFC East, obviously, I don't know, just something about the Vikings and the NFC East. They do not enjoy playing anyone from our division, or the Eagles division, I should say, not our, but they got absolutely obliterated by the Cowboys and the Eagles, and then they get smoked in the playoffs. Not really smoked, it was a close game, but they get outplayed by the New York Giants as well. So I do think Kevin O'Connell. Real quick before I go deeper into my list, who do you think was left off?
And Andy Reid.
I knew it, yeah. For some reason, I thought you were going to say Dan Campbell. Then I'm like, he's definitely going to say Andy Reid. And that's fair. I'll let you talk about that when it's your turn. But I agree with you. Yeah, I would put him. He deserves to be on this list as well. But the 5 candidates is already a lot, and I think all 5 of these guys had great seasons. So now I'm going to go through. I think Brian Dable deserves to be number 1. So the top 3 coaches on this team, they all, when you look at preseason win total predictions, they come out like, so for instance, the Giants, they were projected to win 6.5 games. So it's a betting term. So you'd either take over, they're going to win 7 or more, they're going to win 6 or fewer if you take under. All 3 of the top guys outperformed their preseason win total predictions by 2.5 games. The guy who had the best actually was Nick Sirianni with 4.5. We'll get to him later. But Brian Dable, I think he came in. They won 5 more games this year than they did a year ago. And I think that's a true testament to how great of a coach that he is. And he comes in, the Giants have been struggling for a while. I think that he has the defense for certain, looking like the defense from like the 2007 to the 2011 years. Those obviously they won 2 Super Bowls during that time, both against the New England Patriots. Brian Dable has his team believing that they deserve to be in the playoffs, that they deserve to be competing for Super Bowls. I love what Michael Strahan said, where immediately he had the support of former players because Brian Dable brought in guys like Michael Strahan and others to talk to this team and kind of get them back to the New York Giants football mindset. This team is one of the best teams in the history of the NFL. They've so many times they've had just absolutely incredible teams. They have some of the best historic players of all time coming through there, mostly on defense. Brian Dable has reinstated the New York state of mind on this football team, and he's completely, in 1 year, has changed the culture of their football team. And that's why I've got him number 1. Number 2 is Kyle Shanahan. And honestly, I couldn't decide. Like I said, the top 4 people any of them can win this award, and I think deserve to win the award. The top 3 for sure, I have them neck and neck. To me, there's no gap. I had to think long and hard to make this list, and I'm still not sure if I even agree with my own list. But I've got Kyle Shanahan number 2 for a few reasons. First of all, they are who we thought the Bills were. They are the best all-around team in the National Football League, and I think it's due in large part to Kyle Shanahan's coaching abilities. And look no further than what he continues to do with quarterbacks in his system. I don't think it matters who plays quarterback for Sean McVay. Kyle Shanahan. It definitely matters who plays for Sean McVay. But Kyle Shanahan, my goodness, like it just seems like you plug in any NFL quarterback into his system and they have great numbers and they win football games. Kyle Shanahan is quite possibly the best offensive coach in the National Football League, and he's one of the best all-around coaches to me. I think when you talk about the best coaches in the league right now, I think obviously you got to consider Belichick, Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, and I think they're the top 3. If you're looking for the best coaches, I should say Mike Tomlin. I'm going to put him on the list too at number 4. But I think if you had like today's Mount Rushmore of coaches that are just coaching today, those are the 4 guys in my opinion. And Kyle Shanahan being the youngest by far of those 4 coaches. Absolutely incredible job. He lost his number 1 quarterback, and then he lost his number 2 quarterback, and then he comes in and leads a team to the NFC Championship with a Mr. Irrelevant final pick of the draft, and Brock Purdy, who is performing as the best quarterback in the National Football League. He did an absolutely incredible job. I think he deserves to be highly considered as a potential candidate to win this award, which takes me to number 3, Doug Peterson. Once again, I don't think people understand how difficult it is to turn around a team in 1 year in your first season. I don't think anyone's ever been put in a more difficult situation in terms of having to turn an organization around than what Doug Peterson was placed into this year. Urban Meyer single-handedly almost destroyed the entire Jacksonville Jaguars organization. There were reports of him being racist, reports of him hitting players. He wasn't flying back with the team plane. He was obviously being grinded upon in a bar by someone other than his wife. This guy, Urban Meyer, probably had the worst coaching stint I've ever seen in my entire life. He tore down that entire organization. And then Doug Peterson gets asked to come in. He wasn't even in the league last year. He comes in. He obviously won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think the one knock on him, in my opinion, when he was with the Eagles was I didn't believe in him as a leader. I kind of thought when the going got rough, he blamed it on other people. That was the one knock I had on him. I actually think this year, looking at it, I think he learned from that because the season didn't get started maybe the way that they had expected. But my goodness, did they finish strong? Doug Peterson had led the league for coaches in the highest differential in win total from last year to this year. They won 6 more games than they won a year ago. Now, obviously, they brought in some great free agent additions. Trevor Lawrence had another, a year in the NFL to learn. Travis Etienne came back from injury. There's many reasons why they performed better, but Doug Pearson is as big of a reason as any of them. I think he did a great job coaching these young players. I think he did a great job rebuilding their confidence, reshaping the organization. I think he did fantastic. And I honestly easily could win this award and is deservingly so. Number 4, Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni, they won 5 more games than a year ago. I believe the whole time. I had the Eagles ranked, I think, as the 3rd best team in the league going into the season. I think it's because they had a fantastic draft. I think they had a fantastic free agency. And I think that Nick Sirianni has done a great job as a coach of this team. He just adds some element of, I don't know what it is, just excitement. He's got the players love to play for him, and the chemistry has never been higher for the Philadelphia Eagles. And then he's done a great job helping develop Jalen Hurts. There are a lot of people who have been part of that process, but Nick Sirianni is a big part of it as well. I think the one knock I have on Nick Sirianni is his love of the passing game. I continue to say that all the time. He loves to pass the football, and this is a team that's built to run the football. However, he's got Jalen Hurts playing as an MVP level player. The Eagles ran the ball extremely well. I think also the training staff they've been able to keep the Eagles healthy the last few years, which I think has been big. But the Eagles are right there with the 49ers in terms of best overall teams this year. They've played incredibly well on both sides of the ball. He's got the players loving the team. They love him. He is passionate. Multiple times this season, he's been brought to tears. Just whether it be big achievements in his career, defending Frank Reich when they beat the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know. I love the passion that Nick Sirianni. He's just so open and raw with his emotions, and I think that's one reason why the players love playing with him, playing for him. And the Eagles had the number 1 record in the league this year. They were tied with the Chiefs, and now they're about to be playing for an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. And Nick Sirianni is a huge reason why. Finally, Sean McDermott. I'm pretty hard on him for being number 5 because I don't think he deserves to be. In fact, I would now also say that Andy Reid deserves to be ahead of him too. The only reason I think Andy Reid didn't get the credit because the Chiefs have been so good, but I know exactly what you're going to say why he deserves to be on the list, and I couldn't agree more. And also, he's my favorite coach of all time. So yeah, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. But Sean McDermott, there are probably 3 guys more deserving, in my opinion, to be on this list. Because like I said, the Bills won 13 games. Honestly, I think he's had the Bills overproducing for a few years now. I think they need a number 1 wide receiver or a number 2 wide receiver. I think they need better running backs on their team. I think the offensive line's good, not great. I think the defense every year is overperforming. He has helped develop Josh Allen. He's done a tremendous job. The Bills have been competing for Super Bowl every single season almost since he's been there. So he's done a fantastic job. But I just don't know that this was the year that he deserves to be on the list. But 13 wins is impressive. I'm really excited to listen to your list, so I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Well, Dylan, I find part of this list to be disrespectful. Okay. Part of this list is disrespectful, but I have a lot of the same lineup that you have, and here's my list. All right. Brian Daboll does deserve to be coach of the year. All right. I said this, and when a coach can do this, that's why it's really just all the more impressive. The Giants outplayed their talent this year on both sides of the ball. They lost a very, very good corner. Didn't matter. Their defense still played well. They lost Kadarius Toney. They shipped Kadarius Toney out the door, and a lot of people were like, "Are you stupid?" Like, it didn't matter. They went to the playoffs. Their wide receiving core is so anemic in terms of production. that it shocks me they even made it to the playoffs. But I think that's how good of a coach Brian Daboll is. I think he's the biggest reason why Josh Allen has become the quarterback that he is. And him leaving, I'm slightly concerned for Josh Allen, but I think he's grown enough as a quarterback. The success is going to be sustained for a while. But I think Brian Daboll is the reason why Josh Allen is as good as he is. I think Brian Daboll has worked wonders with Danny Dimes. Daniel Jones is probably kissing the floor, thanking God that Brian Daboll is in his life, because Brian Daboll has just overperformed even my expectations for the Giants. I didn't expect them to be this good this year. I didn't even expect them to win a playoff game this year, and they did both of those. So he definitely deserves to be coach of the year. Now, here's where things get shaky, Dylan. All right. I think Kyle Shanahan, second or third best coach in football. I think Bill Belichick is actually, I think Kyle's third best, Bill's second best. Andy Reid's proven the past few years he's first best. I think Andy Reid is the offensive savant that Bill Belichick is for the defense. And I understand even in Kyle Shanahan's place, he's the next best offensive mind in football. You're right. It doesn't matter which quarterback you put back there, he's going to have success. I think John Lynch is in the running, should be in the running for GM of the year. I think personally he should win that award if that is an award, because John Lynch puts together the most elaborate puzzle I've seen as a roster, and all of it's got stars from top to bottom, potential Hall of Famers on every level of the football. And I think Kyle Shanahan's like, you've given me the pieces. I'm going to put together this puzzle and it's going to look phenomenal. And he does it. And it doesn't matter who they have at quarterback. He's got weapons galore. His running game always works. I've never seen his running game not work. He's like, I'm going to take what my dad did. I'm going to build on it. And I'm just going to run the football down people's throats. He's got an elaborate passing attack that, as soon as he left, Matt Ryan was not the same. Matt Ryan never achieved the heights that he achieved when Kyle Shanahan was his OC. And I can say the same actually for Julio Jones. The success he saw with Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator was not replicated after Kyle Shanahan left. So I think there's an argument there to be made for Kyle Shanahan to be number two. But Andy Reid, to me, we've got a problem here with sustained success. And I was trying to look up how much each team spent in the AFC to beat the Chiefs, especially in the AFC West. I'm pretty sure it's close to $1 billion to beat the Chiefs. The Chargers get Khalil Mack. The Chargers get J.C. Jackson. The Raiders get Devontae Adams. The Raiders get Chandler Jones. I know he's been there for a while, but I know why we got him. They got him. They got him to get after Patrick Mahomes. Look at the Denver Broncos. They trade for Russell Wilson. All right. Von Miller leaves, but they signed Bradley Chubb to a longer term deal. They spent a buku bucks to beat the Chiefs, and not a single one of them could do it. The Chargers got close, still went 0-2 against the Chiefs, got bounced out of the first round of the playoffs by the Jacksonville Jaguars. The AFC has done all these things to beat the Chiefs, and they can't do it. The Chiefs, best scoring offense in football, the best offense in football, period, destroyed the 49ers at their full strength with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. It didn't matter. The Chiefs put up 44 points or 40-ish points and won. Like, sustained success we have a problem with, and apparently it's not worthy of coach of the year. Andy Reid is three wins shy of tying Tom Landry, and he loses his Hall of Fame level wide receiver, goes 14-3, gets the first seed. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. So I think Andy Reid should be on this list. It's disrespectful that Sean McDermott is on this list and not Andy Reid. Doug Peterson, like you said, phenomenal coach. I think he got one of the shorter ends of the stick in Philadelphia, but it clearly wasn't working and players weren't listening to him anymore. So he needed a change of scenery. And he happened to fall into one of the best situations in football with an owner who wanted to spend money because he wants the Jaguars to be a winning franchise, and a quarterback who is otherworldly and may be one of the best, if not the best, college football player of all time. The guy never lost on Saturdays, which is, Trevor Lawrence is phenomenal. You step into that situation, you have the awareness to realize these players are hurt because they all are burnt by the previous coach here. You mend those fences, you get them to produce on offense, you get returning talent, who, Travis Etienne got hurt, comes back from the injury, looks phenomenal. You trade James Robinson out. You say, Travis, you're my guy. You still have, you got monsters on defense. I thought their wide receiving core was weak-ish, not as bad as the Giants, but still weak. I did not expect them to perform like they performed this year. I think a lot of that has to do with Doug Peterson from the Andy Reid tree. Good offensive mind. I think he's going to be a great coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars for a long time. And I think this team is built for sustained success, which apparently you get knocked for if you're Andy Reid. Then Nick Sirianni, I agree with 100% of what you said. 100%. There's even Nick Sirianni was like yelling. I couldn't tell if he was yelling at fans or if he was yelling at fans of the Eagles. But either way, I'm like, man, a coach that's like fired up, that's talking trash or whatever to fans, if he's talking to opposing fans, I don't know. I kind of like that. I kind of like the passion that he has. I kind of like how he came to bat for Frank Reich, because I think Frank Reich is a good coach. I like almost everything about Nick Sirianni. There's the cockiness there is not it's more likable than the Bengals' cockiness, to be honest. And I think he goes to bat for his players. I think the players love him. I think you're right. Like the way he's grooming Jalen Hurts into being a more well-rounded quarterback in football. I think Jalen needs that, especially start off his career, because of the type of quarterback he is. But I think he's done a phenomenal job, and you got your team to the number 1 seed. That's worthy. I think, at least I think it is. I don't know about actual NFL voters, but I think that's worthy of being Coach of the Year consideration. Sean McDermott, I think it's impressive to this end. All right. Several times we saw it with Kyle Shanahan. We saw it with the Chiefs and Charlie Weiss. When prolific offensive coordinators leave, teams tend to falter. They fall apart. The Bills didn't. The Bills played their hearts out. Like you said, you think that their defense wasn't as good as they played, which is a testament to Sean McDermott and his leadership. The offense certainly doesn't have the horses that we thought they did, really. But they still played well, and they still got it to the playoffs. And they were this close to the number 1 seed. So I understand why he's in consideration, but to put him above Andy Reid, it grinds my gears. And I love the Dan Campbell mention, because Dan Campbell keeps biting kneecaps off, and everyone's thinking that's weird as heck, but it's working. All right. He's gotten the Lions. These people have been competitive since Dan Campbell got there, and he definitely deserves Coach of the Year mention. I think next year, depending on how they play, if they can repeat the success and get better, especially with Jameson Williams being a bigger part of the offense next year because he's healthier, if they achieve some new heights, he would be my coach to watch for Coach of the Year next year.
So I looked up a few things while you're talking to answer some of your questions. So the AFC West spent, the 3 teams other than the Chiefs spent over $311 million just on free agency spending last season alone. They had 2 teams that were in the top 10. The Chargers were number 5, and I think the Raiders were number, let's see here. I think they were 10, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10. So they had 2 teams in the top 10 in terms of spending. Another thing I looked up because I was curious, I was like, when was the last time Andy Reid won a Coach of the Year award? 2002. He hasn't won a single one with the Chiefs, which I do think is disrespectful, because the Chiefs, I think, have been the best team pretty much year in, year out. It's kind of like what I thought about the Patriots when Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were together. It was like, as long as those 2 guys are there, I fully expect this team to be competing for a Super Bowl, if not winning it every single year. The same can be said this year. I disrespected my favorite coach of all time by not even mentioning him as the guys who got passed up on. So, Andy Reid, if you're watching, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Sometimes
send him a cheeseburger and you'll be fine. That'll
I'm going to BYU. Really, I know you went to BYU, Andy Reid. I know you know how hard it is. I've got a busy schedule. Sometimes things get lost in the thick of things, and you deserve to be on the list. You deserve to be on the list. Favorite coach of all time. It's honestly, that's really disrespectful. I didn't realize he'd only won 1. This is one of the best coaches in NFL history, and they've only voted him as the best coach of the year once. I don't know about that. He's in the conference championship.
He's 5th in wins all time.
I need to look it up because I want to know who has more conference championship appearances between Bill Belichick and Andy Reid, because it's got to be close.
That's another thing.
Yeah, he's there every year. I think he might probably have. I don't know. He may have beaten Bill Belichick. Quite
He's the
honestly, in
only
that.
coach in NFL history with 10 playoff wins with 2 teams.
Yep. And he was the first coach, I think, to go to 3 consecutive conference championships with 2 different teams. Like,
Yeah.
this guy is absolutely phenomenal. This is
And
the
he's
5th time in a row the Chiefs have been in the AFC Championship. That's crazy. That's crazy. To sustain that level of success for this long, they've only won 1 Super Bowl, but I don't know. This is the reason. Andy Reid's the reason why I've never been a Chiefs fan my entire life. I'm softening, 1, because I want to work with the Chiefs. 2, because I've fallen in love with the city in which they play. 3, I adore Andy Reid. If I could meet one person right now in life, it'd be Andy Reid because I'm freaking obsessed with Andy Reid. I think he's one of the best coaches of all time. Now I'm ticked up. Now my gears are grinded
yes.
because Andy
Yes.
Reid deserves to be, you know what, screw it. He deserves to be number 1. I don't believe in this 2B nonsense. To be or not to be. Not to be. To be number 1. He is the best coach in the National Football League. This is ridiculous. How does he only have 1 award? I'm pissed off because I didn't realize this. Andy Reid's phenomenal. The fact, like what you said, they lost Tyreek Hill. Now, I think that's being overplayed slightly because everyone's acting as if, wow, Mahomes and Reid really got the Chiefs playing well with this makeshift receiving core. I'm like, this is a pretty dang good receiving
Yeah.
core still without Tyreek Hill. Juju Smith-Schuster coming in, fantastic. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has, he had a couple moments where he looked decent. Kadarius Toney, wow, they got him playing extremely well. I thought he was just being brought in to be a glorified punt returner because of how bad Sky Moore had been. No, he quite honestly might be their number 1 wide receiver right now. They do have Travis Kelce, who is probably a top 3 tight end of all time, in my opinion. You probably put him even higher. I think it's Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski, and then probably Travis Kelce. Depends on how much longer he can sustain this success. He may move to number 1 all time. I don't know. I just imagine Tony Gonzalez with Patrick Mahomes would be absolutely lethal. I can't even imagine what would happen in that situation, especially in the era of football in which we play. But Andy Reid, the disrespect for this guy's got to stop. I don't understand it. He's one of the most, I think, the coach that people would like to play for the most, quite honestly. That's the one thing Bill Belichick, I think, lacks is awareness, emotional awareness with his players. Obviously, we've heard about the Tom Brady situation. He pissed him off. But Andy Reid doesn't do that. Andy Reid is there for his players. I think you saw the tragedy with Javon Belcher and what Andy Reid did in that situation. I think, I love how about those Chiefs every time he does that. It is almost annoying to me as a non-Chiefs fan, but I'm like, if I was on that team, I would love Andy Reid even more. But he's just such a great guy, great coach, and he gets passed over year after year for Coach of the Year. This year is a hard year to win. I don't even know who's going to win this award because the 4 of the 5 guys they have on the list are equally deserving. And then you have 2 first-year coaches just absolutely doing crazy things. And then you have Kyle Shanahan winning with a third-string quarterback who's a rookie. So, it's just tough to beat any of those guys. But yeah, the fact that Andy Reid's not even on the list after leading the Chiefs to the number 1 seed in the AFC, a very solid AFC. I'm one of the few people that thinks the NFC is better than the AFC. I don't know why people act like there's this big gap. I think the AFC has better quarterbacks. The NFC has better teams, quite honestly. And I can't wait to see this year's Super Bowl. I'm really hoping it's the Chiefs and the Eagles. I think we agree on that. I think a lot of people, at least that follow our channel, agree on this. But thank you for bringing that to light. Thank you for getting my gears grinded. Now I've got plenty of energy to go through the rest of this day because this is absolute BS. I'm gonna make some phone calls as soon as the show is over. I'm calling the league office because something needs to be done. I don't know what it is. Some type of discrimination. I don't understand it. But we're making phone calls. Andy, don't you worry, because Dueker Sports is on the case for you. We're gonna get this taken care of. Next year, he better win Coach of the Year, or all hell's gonna break loose. Quite frankly.
Or this year would be nice.
Well, unfortunately, they already made this makeshift list that doesn't include him. No, I think the list is pretty solid. Yeah, I am kicking myself for not saying Andy Reid, but I don't understand. We both agree. I feel bad because I'm not trying to disrespect Sean McDermott, but there are way too many people who are more deserving of this spot. I don't understand what the voters were thinking by putting him on there. They weren't even the number one team in the AFC. And don't tell me that the playoffs don't matter, because I know they're watching it. And you just saw the Chiefs make it back again, and the Bills get manhandled by the freaking Cincinnati Bengals, who were without their entire starting offensive line. Might as well have been 3 of the 5. Absolutely insane. And like I said in my bit, I think they underperformed. They won 13 games. I don't know how that's considered underperforming, but they did, because I don't think that I never believed in them to win the Super Bowl really throughout the course of the season. I thought they might win the AFC this year, but when I looked at the NFC, I thought the whole time, I love that the Eagles and Niners are there because they're the top 2 teams in the NFC. I thought both of them were better than the Buffalo Bills. And even though they beat the Chiefs earlier this year, I expected the Chiefs to win against them in the playoffs because of how sloppy they've been. And great point for you, the Brian Dable mentioned as a reason why maybe the Bills aren't as great on offense this year. Couldn't agree more. The guys, that's another guy who I think you look at 2 coaches that got their first head coaching gig late in their careers. There's been several, actually. One of them just coached the Texans 2 years ago. That was kind of disrespectful, but fired after 1 year. That's a whole other story for another day. But Bruce Arians and Brian Dable are 2 coaches who are in this league far too long before getting a shot to be the head guy. And I think Brian Dable is going to take – I'm happy for him that he's as young as he is. And honestly, I don't know why. I don't have anything against the New York Giants. I'm an Eagles fan. I get that. That could be blasphemy. I'm too busy focused on hating the Dallas Cowboys. I don't have time to worry about the New York Giants. I don't care if that's disrespectful. There's something about the Cowboys that I don't like. But no, I think the Coach of the Year award this year is definitely the most controversial and the tightest race by far.
Agreed.
But that is it for today's show. I hope we grinded your gears, and I hope you got fired up like we did about this show. I hope you guys enjoyed football this weekend, because I cannot wait for tomorrow. I've been looking forward to it all week long. I've been looking forward to it all season long. I think we have the top 4 teams in the National Football League going head-to-head tomorrow for a shot at going to the Super Bowl. I cannot wait. I cannot be more excited. I know that Christian and I are going to have a blast. Both of our teams are playing. Good luck to the Chiefs, Christian.
Good luck to the Eagles.
I so hope to see you guys in the Super Bowl along with the Eagles. So thanks for watching. We'll be back next Monday, and keep it tuned on Dueker Sports.